In this episode, I will give you my first impressions of the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at PM-podcast.com. This is the live stream for episode number 470, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Always nice to be with you. Thank you for joining me today. And for those of you who are not joining me today and who are accessing this episode recorded, not live, please do remember this is a video episode. So if you're only getting the audio and not the video, then please do look for the play video episode link in your podcast app or visit pm-podcast.com/470. So what are we going to be doing today? On July 1st of this year, the electronic version of the PMBOK Guide 7th edition was released by the Project Management Institute. In its structure, this 7th edition marks a major departure from all previous versions because this new edition is principles-based, whereas all previous versions were process-oriented. And my goal today is to give you my initial executive high-level overview of the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. In other words, we won't go into the details. And here in part one, as you can see on the screen, we'll see how this new version was developed. We'll introduce the principles and the domains, and we'll take a look at how it fits in. And then in part two, we'll take a look at how the PMP exam and also PMP exam preparation studies are affected by this new version of the PMBOK Guide. Also, a few days ago, I put out a survey. I was asking for your questions about the new 7th edition, and I received over, and I literally just checked before I started this live stream here, 71 questions from you. And I think I have them all covered today because so many people were asking the same question. But if you have any additional questions for me during the live stream, then please don't hesitate. Put that into the chat and I'll bring them up and I'll answer them right now. So I did mention that survey that I had, and now what we're going to do is let me show you the number one question that I got from you for this live presentation here today. This is the number one question. My exam, my PMP exam, is very soon. Which PMBOK version do I use? And here is the answer to that question. If you are taking the exam in 2021, then use the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. Okay? For those of you taking it in 2021, use the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. I will get back to this in part two. We'll look at the details. I'll explain exactly how this works and why you should be using the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. Have the first people who have joined us here. Umar is here. Hello, Cornelius. And we also have Cor Sheepers joining us from Johannesburg in South Africa. Hello, everybody. Okay, let's go on to part one of today's live stream, the PMBOK Guide 7th edition, where I want to give you my executive overview and first impressions. Here they are. All the 7 editions of the PMBOK Guide. So the PMBOK Guide is officially called a guide to the project management body of knowledge. PMBOK Guide. It is a publication by the Project Management Institute, by PMI, and it documents the standards and good practices for the field of project management. The first edition to the 6th edition, they were very much focused on describing how a project is managed using processes, like a process of how to develop a work breakdown structure, for example. You can see this here on the screen, like the 3rd edition, it had 44 processes, then the 4th edition, 42 processes, and so on. But the big break comes this year with the PMBOK Guide 7th edition because PMI is going away from this process focus, and instead we are now discussing the how a process, how a project should be done. We're not discussing that any longer. We are discussing the what, the principles. You can see this at the bottom right there, where you can see the 7th edition now has 12 principles and 8 performance domains is what they call them. There are no more any processes described in the PMBOK guide. Okay. So let's go on. Let's talk about this. So we're going from the processes to the principles, but we're also going from the how to the what. Okay. So the what is now what PMBOK Guide 7 describes. It is a higher level executive overview of what you're supposed to be doing in project management, the principles that underlie your actions in project management as you're executing your projects. Whereas in PMBOK 654321, PMI Standards Plus, Prince 2, Scrum, Agile, the ISO standards, the old ANSI standards, pick up any project management methodology, right? That's where they go. So they go on the second level there under the how do we do project management. Okay, let's jump in and take a look at what this looks like in comparison here, the how to the what. What you see here is taken from the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. Many of these graphics that you see are from the 7th edition. And what you see here is on the left-hand side, you see a rundown of the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. That's the orange block. And on the right side, the purple block, that is the 7th edition. Now, what many people don't actually realize is the PMBOK Guide, since I believe the 4th edition, consisted of 2 documents. It consisted of the PMBOK Guide itself and also the ANSI standard for project management. Okay, and this is what you see here on the left-hand side. The top, slightly salmon, is that what that color would be? With the background there, that's the PMBOK Guide, and the white block underneath that is the standard for project management. Now, in the PMBOK Guide 7th edition, they flipped this around. At the top, the white block on the right-hand side, that is the ANSI standard for project management. And this is where PMI introduces the 12 project management principles. Okay. And then below that, you can see this slightly purple, light purple block right there. This is the actual guide to the project management body of knowledge. So that is the PMBOK guide, in which PMI now introduces us to 8 project performance domains. And then at the very bottom, you see 2 arrows pointing to the very bottom there. That's where PMI is now introducing PMI Standards Plus. This is the digital content platform. The idea behind this is that the PMBOK Guide no longer includes all the detailed information about, for example, what goes into a project charter. That information used to be in PMBOK 1 to 6, but PMBOK 7, because it is now a very high-level executive overview of project management, that information is no longer in the PMBOK Guide. It doesn't mean it's no longer valid or true. So PMI had to figure out a way of, well, where do we put this? Okay, they put it online. So they've taken all the detailed information about the how for project management. So how do you create a charter? How do you create a work breakdown structure? What is included in a charter? All of that information is now on PMI Standards Plus. I believe PMI Standards Plus is free to all members at this time. Okay. All right, I'm starting to get questions already about how does this impact the simulator? What about the PMP exam? As I said early on, in part 1, we're looking at the PMBOK guide, and in part 2, we're going to jump into the PMP exam. So give it some time. We'll get there eventually. Okay, so let's zoom in onto the right-hand side here, onto the right block there. And as you can see, those 2 blocks, the white block at the top, That is part 1 of the PMBOK guide. This is the ANSI standard, okay? The ANSI standard of project management, or for project management rather. And this is where PMI introduces those principles. And then at the bottom, you see the actual PMBOK guide. That's kind of where PMI goes in and says, okay, let us translate these principles and show you, what that means on real live projects. Now that's what's happening here. Okay, so we now start with the standard, and then we go into those 8 performance domains. And how exactly does this work? Okay, PMI has this graphic here for us. At the top, we have the principles. So it's basically the same as this one right here, right? So the white block becomes the table at the top, and the purple block becomes those circles, right? So it's the same idea here, top and bottom block. At the top, you see those 12 principles. These come from the standard for project management. For example, it says here, where is the team? I can't see it. There we go. Create a collaborative team environment. It's the second one right here. Right, there is a principle that talks about this and how you should deal with people and treat people, and what the principles are and the underlying ideas of how you create a collaborative team environment. And these principles here at the top, they guide your behavior, they guide my behavior on how we manage these project performance domains here at the bottom. We'll jump into the principles and project performance domains in just a moment. One of the questions that I got from the survey that I put out there was, well, how do I get my hands on the PMBOK guide? Very simple. Click here, pretty much. Go to pmprepcast.com/PMBOK, and that will take you to Amazon, where you can purchase the digital version at the moment of the PMBOK guide. Or if you are a member of PMI, then simply go to pmi.org, log into your account, go to the standards section, and in the standards section, you will see a download option for the PMBOK guide. Okay, we got a comment here from Steve Payne. Actually, quite a lot more pragmatic, sir, as you are saying. Steve, are you agreeing with me as I am saying, or is it, no, it's contrary to what I'm saying? So I'm not quite sure how to read your comment here. Reza asks, was such a major change necessary? Is this a sign that the process-based approach on PMBOK 6th edition was becoming outdated, insufficient, irrelevant to what the industry needs? Okay, Reza, PMI addresses this very early on in the PMBOK guide, 7th edition. It says, nothing that is written in the previous editions is wrong. Everything from the past still applies, okay? We still need the processes. We still need the knowledge areas. We still need the process groups, because that's how we manage a project. But PMI is going away from describing the how in the PMBOK guide to the what in the PMBOK guide. So the principles, the performance domains, they describe the what of project management. And then in other places, in PMI Standards Plus, in methodologies like Scrum, Agile, that's where the how is described. So PMI is taking the PMBOK guide and putting it into the executive level at the top, and having it up there. Steve, thank you very much. Agree. Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Now then, let us move on. So this is where you download it, pmprepcast.com/PMBOK. That will take you to Amazon, where you can download. Oh, by the way, all my Amazon links that I provide, no affiliate links. So I do not get any commission if you click on that link. I don't do that. There's no personal gain for me if you click on that link, just to be absolutely clear. All right, now then, let's jump into those two parts and open up the PMBOK guide and take a little bit of a closer look there at what is actually in there. So on the left-hand side, we have part 1 of the PMBOK guide. That's the standard for project management. And on the right, we have the actual PMBOK guide that kind of translates what the standard means, how you apply that on your project. The standard consists of two areas, two subsections. First, there is the system for value delivery, and then there are the 12 principles. And that's what we want to look at right now. You may be wondering to yourself or asking yourself, what do they mean by a system for value delivery? Quite simple. Take a look at how your organization is organized. Right? How is your company organized? How do you do projects, right? Remember, a project delivers something. In the past, we always talked about deliverables, outputs, outcomes, right? Those were the words that we used in regards to a project. How are you organized? Do you just do projects, individual projects? Do you maybe have programs? Do you have portfolios? How is that structured, the way you do and run and manage your projects? That's basically what PMI talks about when they say a system for value delivery, right? What is the system that your organization has created in order to run their projects and deliver their projects? Because now, at the end, we have an outcome, we have a result, we have an output, a deliverable from the project. Don't stop your thinking there. Take the next step, is what PMI is saying. What's the value that you are creating? Right? What exactly is the value at the end that we have, the customer has? Is it financial? Is it an improvement of some sort? What is the value that your project provides? And this is where the system comes in. Pretty straightforward, actually, this whole idea. And this, again, from the PMBOK Guide 7th edition, a graphic. This is a sample system for value delivery where you have everything. Right. So on the let's start from the right here. So on the right hand, we have the various projects here that are managed individually. We have portfolios, we have programs. So all of this here is part of your value delivery system. And do note that at the bottom, we have operations. Okay. So we do include operations in the system for value delivery. A project is just one of many components of a system for value delivery. Okay, although personally speaking, I think it's the most important one, because after all, without the project, no project, no outcome, no value. That's pretty much what it boils down to. And how you set the whole thing up around it, that is your system of how you deliver the value that comes out of doing all your projects. Okay, so that is this section here of the standard. And then let's take a little bit of a closer look of these 12 principles. Again, the 12 principles, they come from the standard for project management. Number 1 is be a diligent, respectful, and caring steward. This basically means, you have to do the right thing. You have to make sure that you're not wasting your company's money, right? To boil it down to a little bit. Then number 2, you want to create a collaborative project team environment, because the more collaborative the team is, the more, coherent the team is, the better your environment is, the better your project team will function. Then you want to effectively engage with stakeholders. And I think the important word here is engage. You don't just want to, manage your stakeholders. You want to engage with them. You want to talk to them. You want to understand, what are your motivations? How can I make this project a success for you? Then you want to focus on value. And that brings us back to the system for value delivery there. What is the value that my project actually is going to deliver? Okay. You want to recognize, evaluate, and respond to system interactions. Now, this is something that even we had this in PMBOK 5 and 6, where they talked about the fact that, those processes, they seem so individual and so, so distinctly separate, where in truth, they're all over the place. They're like this, completely intertwined, right? So PMI makes a point here with this principle to say, make sure that you understand these interactions and that you can respond to them appropriately. Principle number 6, demonstrate leadership behaviors. Of course, we've been talking a lot about going from project manager to project leader, okay? And this is a major step here by adding this principle into the list of 12. Going on to the next 6, tailor based on context. We'll get back to tailoring in a little bit when we talk about the PMBOK guide itself. You want to build quality into processes and deliverables. I mean, this is an old adage, right? Do it right the first time. So if you build quality into what you're doing things and how you're doing things as part of the project, you will have a quality output, right? So we're keeping that. Navigate complexity. You really have to understand how your project works and where the complexities are and how to best navigate them and make sure that the outcome in the end meets the need of the customer. Optimize risk responses is also in here. And, I ask myself, why do we talk about the risk responses here? And then I remember the conversation that I had with Dr. David Hilson, the risk doctor. And he said, whenever people talk about risk, they talk about, looking at the risk, creating a list of the risks and then doing something. And then, they don't. When actually a risk occurs, nothing happens. People focus too much on the administration of the risk and less on the responding to the risk. So putting this here as one of the 12 main principles and saying, you have to optimize your risk responses, that puts a major focus on the thing that we have seriously forgotten in the past. Number 11 is embrace adaptability and resiliency. This is a nod to Agile, where PMI really says, you have to be adaptable. You have to be resilient. If something breaks, you have to be able to really bounce back quickly, build fast and fail fast and then fix it and keep doing it. That's kind of the underlying idea behind this. And then lastly, if you remember, 2 episodes ago, we had Tim Creasy on the program. We talked about change management, and this is what this 12th principle talks about. Enable change to achieve the envisioned future state. And I have to admit, this is one of the things that I, in my project, usually haven't really worried too much about. Well, at the end, we have to implement this, right? There's change, and how will people react, the people who are affected by this change? You really never take that step. And by putting this at the very top of our thinking, hopefully implementing the changes is going to be more looked at in the future. All right, so these are the 12 principles here from a very high level. Okay, I see more questions coming in here regarding training, exam prep products, simulators, and things like that. Again, we're in part 1 right now of our review here, and we'll take a look at that later on. All right, so we've looked at the left-hand side. We looked at the system for value delivery and the 12 principles. And now that was part of the standard for project management. Now let's go on to the right-hand side here, the PMBOK guide itself. Okay, so the PMBOK guide is only a section within the whole document, and it consists of project performance domains, tailoring, models, methods, and artifacts. And I don't think that we're actually going to jump into models, methods, and artifacts in my presentation here today, because it's just a high-level overview of some things that you could use. So PMI acknowledges, we have to talk about it, but we don't really want to talk about it because we want to stay very high level. So they really don't dig deep into these methods, artifacts, models there on the right-hand side. Okay. So let's take a look at the 8 performance domains. So what is a performance domain? So a performance domain, PMI says, is a group of related activities that are critical for the effective delivery of project outcomes. Let me repeat that. I'm actually reading it, as you can pretty much tell. A performance domain is a group of related activities that are critical for the effective delivery of project outcomes. And just like the process groups and the processes from PMBOK 6, these 8 performance domains that you see here, they are interactive, they are interrelated, they are also interdependent of each other. And the focus that you put on there, is to work in unison to achieve a desired outcome. Right. So if you follow the 12 principles, if you apply these 8, or if you work on these 8 performance domains, you should have the desired project outcome at the end of your project. Okay. So, we talked about the 12 principles just a moment ago. And these 12 principles, they provide guidance to you and me on our projects and influence how exactly we execute and work on these performance domains, right? And there is an overlap. There is an overlap here as well. You will have noticed that there is a principle that talks about creating a collaborative team environment. And then there is also the performance domain here, number 2, where we talk about the team. Okay. And yes, there is overlap. Principles tell us how we should behave, and the performance domains, they get a little bit closer on the how, right? How do you do things? But still, in the performance domains, PMI, it keeps it rather high level. They talk primarily about the what is important about stakeholders, about teams, and all that. And they go a little bit into the how do we do this, but not really, because that's what PMI is trying to get away from in the 7th edition. So, okay. The 8 performance domains: stakeholders, team, the development approach, a life cycle performance here, planning, project work, delivery, measurement, and uncertainty. If you look at these, right, you can see this is really nothing new, right? If you compare this to your understanding from what we had in the PMBOK Guide 5th, 6th, 4th edition, all of this is taking the work that we do as project managers and putting it into these 8 buckets of what we now call the performance domains in the PMBOK Guide. All right. So from a very high level perspective, what I really like about each of these performance domains is this graphic here. At the beginning of each of the graphics, at the beginning of each of the domains, there is this graphic here that on the left-hand side gives you a sentence that talks about, what is this all about? Right? The team performance domain addresses activities and functions associated with the people who are responsible for choosing product deliverables that realize business outcomes and in the end deliver value, right? And then on the right-hand side, and I think this is where it gets down to the more important bit, why should we do the team performance domains? And it explains, here is the desired outcomes at the end of doing this right. You will have shared ownership. Your team will really say, this is my project. I own this, okay? You will have a high-performing team if you really focus on the team performance domain here. And a high-performing team does things more quickly, they work together well, your outcomes are of a high quality. So this is really a core, right? That the people who are on your project work together well. And if you, applicable leadership and other interpersonal skills demonstrated by all team members. Again, this is a nod to Agile, I would say, where we talk about generalizing specialists and self-organizing teams, that do what needs to be done on their own without having really to have somebody who is in front and leading them. So the team leads itself. Okay, so much for the high-level overview of the team performance domains. Okay. Now, the next part of the PMBOK guide talks about tailoring. Okay. And here PMI says, well, there are many things that you can tailor on a project. In particular, you can tailor the life cycle and the development approach. And we'll get to take a look at that in just a moment. And you also get to tailor the processes, how you engage with people. Remember, one of the things we do is we engage with our stakeholders, but not every stakeholder needs to be engaged with the same way. So you have to really know your stakeholders. You have to engage your stakeholders appropriately. You have to tailor the tools, right? Maybe you use a WBS in a certain way on project 1, but on project 2, you use it in a different way, right? So you really have to think it through and understand how to tailor your project. It becomes a major part of what we do as project managers. It's not just, I have this methodology, let's just follow it. No. I have this methodology. Let's tailor it so that it fits our needs and our projects and delivers value in the end. Same with the methods and artifacts that you use on your project. Tailor them, make them work for you, not you work around them because they just don't fit into what you are doing. Okay, so now a question that I have is this. This is one of the questions that came in the survey that I did. Will PMI expect practitioners to reference both the 7th and the 6th edition of the PMBOK in their jobs, or do they plan to publish a new companion to the 7th edition with all the processes? So let me answer the second question here first. There are no processes in the 7th edition. So PMI does not plan on publishing a companion that explains this. This is what we'll find in PMI Standards Plus. If you've done an agile project, you can still use PMBOK Guide 7th edition and use, for example, you can use Scrum as the development method that you use, or you use Crystal or whatever it is that your company uses in regards to the development method, in regards to the processes, to the how of executing your project. Now, the first one, are you expected to reference both? Well, here is what PMI expects you to do. PMI expects you to tailor the life cycle, okay, and the development approach to your organization's needs and project's needs. Okay, so it doesn't expect you to do everything as it's said in the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. It expects you to tailor it to your needs. Let's take a look at that from the perspective of the development approach. Okay, so here again, a graphic from the PMBOK Guide 7th edition, where they talk about how to tailor things. Okay, so on the left-hand side, you select an individual development approach. I mean, that's what we all do, right? You say, okay, this is an agile project. Well, let's do Scrum, or let's do Scrumban, or let's do Kanban, or let's do a hybrid, or whatever it may be. Okay, and then it says tailor it for your organization. Okay, and at this point, you have to look at your organization. You have to understand how the organization wants things done, and then you appropriately tailor the development approach to your organization. Step 3, the third box there, tailor for your project. When you come into this step, you now have a development approach that is tailored for your organization. Well, that's all well and good, but it doesn't really work perfectly for this project here. So I have to adjust this to make it fit for my project. And then 2 weeks later, you realize, oh my God, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. We have to inspect, we have to adapt, we have to tailor. So you don't just take a development approach and you follow it blindly. No, you have to tailor it so that it meets your needs on the project and in the organization. Okay, so that's it really for the PMBOK Guide high-level overview. Let me close with this question here. Okay, tell you the truth, when I saw this question coming in, this was the first question that anybody submitted in the survey. This is from Usman, who submitted this. When I saw this, I'm like, this guy gets it, because this was exactly the thing that I had wondered and worried about from the very first moment when PMI explained how the PMBOK Guide 7th edition was going to be different than the 1st to the 5th edition previously. Let's take a look at this. So this has always been my kind of fear. Do you think that the 6th edition was more equipped in making a person do practical hands-on stuff at a workplace than the 7th edition? Quick answer, yes, I do. Okay, so hands-on stuff, yes. The 6th edition enables a person to visualize where to start his stuff at the workplace, because honestly speaking, companies still ask a new or experienced product manager to develop cost, schedule, scope, and stuff, rather than principles that are mentioned in the 7th edition. Now, this has always been my fear. If they go away from explaining how do we do things, as we have seen so far in 4, 5, 6th edition of the PMBOK Guide, and we're now going to this strategic area as we are in the 7th edition, where we talk about principles and performance domains and what you're supposed to be thinking about, and not really explaining how it's done. Is this going to be a problem? And I think it may be. Right? Let me show you what the trouble is that we have. What I can see are these 5 areas here that are all going in a completely different direction. At the top, we have the PMBOK Guide. The PMBOK Guide goes north. It explains 12 principles and 8 performance domains. The PMP exam content outline, going off to the right there around 2 o'clock, the PMP exam content outline has 3 domains on which you will be tested on during the PMP exam. These domains are completely unrelated to the 8 domains from the PMBOK Guide. Then bottom right there, that's the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. It used to have 5 domains, 49 processes, and here's the thing. PMI clearly states in the PMBOK Guide 7th edition, those processes, those knowledge areas, they are not wrong just because we published the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. They are still valid in some organizations. Some organizations will want to use these. Okay, so now we have the 12 principles at the top, 8 domains, 3 domains in the ECO. We also have 5 domains from the PMBOK Guide 6th edition, 654321, I believe. They haven't changed much, and 49 processes. They're all pointing into a completely different direction. Okay. Then PMI has its own training. The PMI ATP exam prep training there at the bottom left, pointing to about 7 o'clock. And in that training, PMI uses 5 topics. These 5 topics, again, completely unrelated to anything we've looked at so far. They're not part of the principles, not part of the performance domains, not part of the ECO domains, not part of the PMBOK 6 domains. No, they're just 5 topics unrelated to everything else. And then on the right-hand side, PMI also created Standards Plus, which personally I find critique, okay, this is opinion piece right now, I find PMI Standards Plus impossible to navigate. I cannot find anything on there, okay? So it's rather hard to figure out where things are. That's my personal opinion there. Right, so again, Standards Plus is supposed to bring together all the tools, the artifacts, the methods that PMBOK 7 doesn't address, but you already have them in PMBOK 6, right? So all of this is pointing into different directions. And PMI so far hasn't really done a good job explaining, how do we bring all of this together? Right? In my personal opinion, there is no way to unify these 5 arrows because they point into completely different directions. Okay? All right. And that's it for part 1 of my presentation, where we look at the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. Now, let's move on to part 2. This has been on everybody's mind. Like I said, I did a survey. I had 70 plus questions, and over 50%, over 75% of the questions were about how does the PMBOK Guide 7th affect the PMP exam? How does the 7th edition affect my personal PMP exam prep? Okay, so here is the most important statement for you to understand in this regard. The PMP exam is not a test of the PMBOK Guide. Let me repeat that. The PMP exam is not a test of the PMBOK Guide. So, what is it then? Instead, the PMP exam has its questions based on the exam content outline, the ECO. That's what you need to understand. Let me show this to you in a few different ways. Okay? So, the PMBOK Guide is only one of 10 reference books. Okay. Oh, there is an error on this slide. We'll get to it. Okay. So on the left-hand side, we have the PMP exam that is based on the exam content outline. The exam content outline is the syllabus of the PMP exam, the user manual, if you wish. Okay. That this user manual, the exam content outline, describes what is the PMP exam like. Oh, it has 180 questions. It contains 50% agile. It has 3 domains. So everything is explained in the exam content outline. And the exam questions are developed based on this user manual. The exam content outline describes what can be part of those questions. And then on the right-hand side, you have 10 reference books. The PMBOK Guide is only one of them. So this is where the error comes in. It's actually +9 others and not +10. So it's 10 reference books in total. So it's the PMBOK Guide plus 9 other books. Okay. Let me show you this view here, slightly different. Okay, same idea, but we're looking at it from the perspective of topics. Okay, what can be part of the PMP exam? We're talking about questions, but how do these topics then become questions? Okay, and well, who then says which of the answers is correct? That's where the references come in. Okay, so when it comes to the topics, that's the exam content outline. The exam content outline describes all the topics. They call them tasks that can be on the PMP exam. Okay, so this describes what PMI can ask you about. Now, PMI takes this information from the exam content outline and develops questions. Okay, so it develops a question and 4 answer choices. Okay, so for example, the exam content outline talks about teams, and you have to manage a team and lead a team. So PMI will develop questions about managing and leading teams that are going to be on your PMP exam. And everything up to this point is based on the exam content outline. So it's developed outside of the PMBOK Guide. The PMBOK Guide is completely irrelevant until this very moment. Now comes the question, well, yeah, which of these 4 answers is correct? PMI says, oh, C is correct. Yeah, why? Why is C correct? How can you prove to me that C is correct? Well, this is where the reference books come in, right? PMI now opens up its 10 reference books and says, well, in book 1 and book 7 on page 100 and 172, this is why answer C is correct. So there are 10 reference books out there, and the PMBOK Guide is only one of those 10 reference books. It's an important one, but nobody ever asks if one of the other 10 books changes, is the PMP exam changing because of that? Everybody always says, well, the PMBOK Guide is changing. Oh my God, is the PMP exam changing? But if any of the other 9 books change, nobody says the same thing. It's just, it's just a new edition of the book. And it's exactly the same thing with the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. And this is something, the mindset that we have to change. Just because the PMBOK Guide isn't available in a new version, the the PMBOK guide doesn't affect the PMP exam in such a way, right? As you can see here, if the exam content outline changes on the left, now the PMP exam changes, right? Just because the reference book changes, it doesn't affect the PMP exam in such a big way. Okay, now with that out of the way, and now you understand that the PMP exam does not test you on the PMBOK guide, it's just a reference book. Here is an important question that I get asked a lot of time, and this is this one right here. Does your training material incorporate the PMBOK guide 7th edition? Okay, and my answer to this is clearly here. Our training materials, they are based on the PMP exam content outline, and they reference the PMBOK guide 6th edition. Okay, let me go back here to this slide right here. So my training materials, so take the questions away in the middle here and replace those with my training materials. They are based on the exam content outline, which they are supposed to be. And on the right-hand side, we use exactly the same reference books, right? We say our training materials reference these 10 books. Now, if you go to the PMI website right now and you look at which are the reference books, PMI says the PMBOK Guide 6th edition is a reference book for the PMP exam. We are now waiting for PMI to make the first move. As soon as PMI says the PMBOK Guide 7th edition is a reference book, then we will go ahead and we will start updating our exam simulator at pmexamsimulator.com, and we will update our training materials at PMPrepCast.com. And believe me, this is not just us. This is also Readable K's company. This is Andy Crow's company. This is PM Training, IIL. Every major training development company out there who teaches the PMP exam does exactly the same. Right now, we do nothing because the PMBOK Guide 7th edition is not a reference book for the current PMP exam. It is still the 6th edition. Okay, nobody makes any changes yet. We're looking into it, of course. What do we have to change? Where do we need to apply? What's going on? How do we fix this and all that? Yes, we're doing that, but we're not making any changes because your reference book is the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. Okay, so what is my recommendation? Here you go. If your exam is in 2021, use the exam content outline. You want to read it, you want to understand it, you need to study it because that is the user manual that explains, okay, that explains what will be on the exam. And then the 6th edition of the PMBOK Guide is what you need to read right now, and also the other reference books. And Arthur asks the all-important question here, which are those other reference books? Arthur, here is the good news. If you are using an experienced training provider, you don't have to read those reference books because that is part of the training that they deliver to you. We know what's going to be on the PMP exam. We keep track of what people say in their lessons learned. We know exactly what we need to teach you from which of these books. We bring it together into our training and we teach this to you so you have a proper PMP exam prep training without having to read those 10 books. If you really want to know, go to your favorite search engine, PMP exam list of reference books or reference list or books list, and you will find that list. And you'll see at the moment it says PMP exam is based on the 6th edition. So in 2021, use the 6th edition, and in 2022, you're going to have to probably switch over to the 7th edition. And this is where I'm not 100% sure. I didn't put this in. Potentially, the 6th edition is still going to be used as a reference book, even in 2022. We don't know because PMI hasn't changed anything. BMI hasn't told us anything. We're still waiting for them to make the first move. Of course, Arthur, you are very welcome. Okay. Now then, With all of this said, here is my recommendation of what your study materials and your study approach should be like. Okay. At the bottom, you start with a PMP exam prep course. Okay. And here's the good news. The current PMP exam prep courses that are out there, they are based on the current standards, on what you need to know. So you don't have to worry about, well, does this already include the PMBOK Guide 7th edition? Because you just learned it's irrelevant at this time. It's not yet part of the PMP exam. Okay, so that is your foundation. Actually, let me be honest. There's one level missing. Below this is your experience as a project manager, right? That's the foundation of it all. Without being a project manager, you can't take the PMP exam. So your foundation is your experience as a project manager. On top of that, you take the PMP exam prep course right there. And then we go one level up. The next thing you want to do is you want to study the PMP exam content outline. Okay. The user manual, what's going to be on the exam? What are they going to ask me? What are all these tasks? What do I need to know and understand for the exam? Again, on top of that, you're going to read the PMBOK guide and the Agile Practice Guide, the APG, the Agile Practice Guide there. Again, this is the PMBOK Guide 6th edition that you are studying right now. And if you're wondering, where do I get the Agile Practice Guide? The Agile Practice Guide comes bundled with the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. So if you buy a print copy, you get 2 books, the Agile Practice Guide. Wait, I have it down here. Let me show this to you. Oh, reach down. There we go. This is the Agile Practice Guide. It's about finger thick. It's not as thick as the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. You want to study that as well. It comes together with the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. Then you also want to read the Agile Manifesto as well as the Scrum Guide. They will, be complementary to the Agile Practice Guide. Remember, 50% of the exam is now on Agile. So the PMBOK Guide and the exam prep course, they will give you a good introduction to plan-driven project management. And hopefully the exam prep course will also include Agile for you. And then Agile Practice Guide, Manifesto, and Scrum Guide, they will really give you, the skinny of what you need to know for Agile. And then on top of all of that, this is all your theoretical know-how. How do you know whether or not you have understood all of this? By a 2021 exam simulator. Okay, and buy a simulator that uses the 6th edition as a reference book, because that is currently what you are supposed to do. Amresh asks, how does PMA ensure that a PMP certified person is up to date since you've just earned 60 PDUs every 3 years? That's exactly how we do it, Amresh. The 60 PDUs is not just 60 PDUs. That is 60 hours of learning, okay? So if you spend 20 hours of learning about new trends and new project management principles every year, that adds up to 60 in 3 years, well, you're up to date. That's what PMI hopes you are doing when you are earning your PDUs. Okay. All right, so these are the things. Ananya Dutta asks, what is the manifesto and the Scrum Guide? The Agile Manifesto is actually, that was the start of everything Agile. It's very simple. It has a very short read, about 2 minutes. Not 2 minutes, about 5 minutes a total read, and then you've seen it. And the Scrum Guide, that is this guide that describes Scrum. It's kind of like the handbook to how do you do Scrum projects. It's out there. Okay, and now let me give this to you as a bulleted list, and then we're very close to done here. My take action for you is this: start by looking for a reputable source and experience as you are preparing for your PMP exam. Then you want to take a 35-hour course. That's a minimum, by the way, for PMP exam prep course. Let me tell you that my course is actually over 60 hours long. That's because it's impossible to put everything you need to know for the PMP exam into 35 hours. It's just not enough time. There is so much that you need to know for the PMP exam that 35 hours is just the minimum. Expect, after you've taken the course, to complement this with about 3 to 5 weeks of self-study, going through those additional references that you want to read. We also have the PM Study Coach guidebook now that we offer. And these guidebooks, they're sort of your weekly plan, right? So week by week, we tell you, here's what you need to study, here's what you need to watch, here's where you need to go, here's additional reading for you. So these guidebooks are quite helpful if you are doing self-study and you don't quite know what to do. And then once again, my most important recommendation, please do use an exam simulator. Every reputable training company out there offers a simulator. Get the one that meets your budget. Get the one that meets your needs in regards to an exam simulator. But do get one, please. And then, yeah, the last bullet, it sounds a little bit simplistic just to say take and pass your exam. But frankly, I do believe you can do this. If you follow this advice, you do all your studies, you put your heart into it, and you really focus and study hard, then, taking the exam is really just, the closing of all that process that you are going. Okay. Rahit wants to know, how does it affect me as a 2017 PMP? It doesn't affect you at all, Rahit. Your PMP exam simply had the PMBOK Guide 5th edition as its reference books, and now the PMP exam has the 7th edition, or the 6th currently. Next year it'll have the 7th as its reference book. For you, it simply means, if you want to update yourself, read the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. That's pretty much it here. All right. I am close to done. Reza says, this was a great presentation. Thank you, Reza. The situation is somewhat confusing, as you acknowledged, with the 5 diverging arrows. Yes, I agree. But this presentation helped clarify it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Reza. And with that comment from Reza, it is time for me to log off here. Okay. All right. So, come on. Next slide, please. All right. So, please visit pmpodcast.com for show notes, transcripts, and PDU information. Our email address is info@pm-podcast.com. And now, finally, we have this. This is actor Sean Bean from, you probably know it, he portrays Boromir in The Lord of the Rings in this meme here. And he says, one does not simply implement the PMBOK guide. Thank you again for joining me today, and until next time.